Emily Carter had worked hundreds of events before, but nothing prepared her for the moment that would change her life forever. It happened in a single, reckless breath. She couldn't pull back once it left her lips. 1 second, she was moving quietly between glittering tables, balancing a silver tray with practiced grace. And the next, she was frozen in place, staring at a tattoo she thought she'd never see again. "Your tattoo. My father had the exact same one." The words escaped her before she even realized she'd spoken them. And the moment they did, the ballroom fell into a suffocating silence. Conversations died mid-sentence. Glasses stopped mid-air. 100 sets of eyes snapped toward her in disbelief. Emily felt as though the entire world had tilted beneath her feet. Dominic Varela slowly turned to face her. He wasn't just any guest. He wasn't a businessman or a philanthropist. Despite the polished suit and the elegant smile he wore like armor, he was the name spoken in whispers. The man people crossed streets to avoid. The shadow that loomed over the city's underworld. And there he stood, staring at her, thumb grazing the serpent and dagger tattoo inked along his wrist. The exact same tattoo on the only photo she had ever seen of her father. Security reacted instantly. Emily heard the shuffle of heavy footsteps surrounding her, felt the prickle of their suspicion closing in. A wave of heat washed over her cheeks, her breath catching in her throat. She knew she had made an unforgivable mistake. She knew she should have kept quiet, swallowed the shock, moved on like a professional, but it was too late. Dominic's voice cut through the tension, low and sharp as the edge of a blade. "Describe it." "For a heartbeat." Emily couldn't speak, but he was staring at her with a focus that made lying or evading impossible. So she told him. Every detail. The emerald sheen on the serpent's scales, the curve of the dagger buried beneath its coils, the small crown etched above the serpent's head. Her voice trembled, but her memory did not. When she finished, Dominic dismissed his guards with a single raised hand. The shift in the room was immediate. Security halted mid-step. Uncertain, but obedient, guests exchanged wide-eyed looks, whispering behind manicured hands. No one ever contradicted Dominic Varela. No one caught him off guard. Yet here he was, studying a waitress like she'd just spoken a prophecy. "After the gala," he said quietly, "you will come to my study." It wasn't a request. Emily nodded because she didn't know what else to do. Her pulse was pounding so hard, it echoed in her ears. The tattoo was the only link to her father, a man her mother insisted had died before Emily's first birthday. A man she'd never met, never heard stories about, never been allowed to ask questions about, and now the most dangerous man in the city had the same mark. For the rest of the night, Emily moved like a ghost. Her hands functioned mechanically, while her mind spiraled with questions she had no answers for. Every time she glanced across the ballroom, she caught Dominic watching her, not with anger, but with something far more unsettling recognition. Guests noticed. They whispered theories and traded rumors, wondering who the trembling waitress could possibly be. To catch Dominic Varela's attention, Emily wished she knew. When the last guest departed and the mansion grew quiet, Dominic's head of security appeared beside her. Emily nearly dropped the empty tray she'd been clutching. "Mr. Varela is ready for you now." The walk through the mansion felt endless. Every doorway, every marble corridor, every piece of art seemed to stare back at her with judgment. Her palms were slick with sweat. She reminded herself to breathe. Dominic's study was dimly lit, the fire casting shadows that danced across the walls. He stood at the window with his back to her, hands clasped behind him. For a long moment, he didn't speak. Emily wondered if she should say something. "Apologize." "Run." Then his voice broke the silence. "Your name is Emily Rose Carter. Born March 3rd, 2004. Currently living in a one-bedroom apartment on Brooklyn Avenue. Second-year college student. You work 2 jobs, including this one. Emily's stomach dropped. He spoke with eerie accuracy. Information he had no reason and no right to know. How do you know all that she demanded? Surprising herself with the strength in her voice. Fear gave birth to bravery she didn't feel. Dominic finally turned around. Because, he said, I've been looking for answers for 20 years. He crossed the room, opened a drawer, and pulled out something wrapped carefully in worn paper. When he placed it on the desk and unfolded it, Emily felt the air drain out of her lungs. A photograph. A much younger Dominic Varela stood on a sunlit beach, arm wrapped around a beautiful young woman. She was smiling, a soft, radiant smile. Emily knew better than her own reflection. Sarah Carter, her mother. Emily staggered forward, unable to stop herself. That's my mom. Dominic didn't smile. If anything, his expression cracked open, revealing something raw beneath. Pain, memory, regret. She wasn't Sarah Carter back then, he said quietly. She was Sarah Romano, and I loved her more than anything in this world. Emily's breath hitched. That word loved was heavy enough to crush her. Dominic went on, the truth spilling like a confession long buried. We planned to leave, he said. I was ready to walk away from the Varela Empire. From my father. From everything. But someone discovered our plans. His jaw clenched at the memory. My father threatened her life. Threatened the life of our unborn child. He showed her what happens to those who defy him. Emily's heart slammed against her ribs. She knew where this was going, but her mind refused to accept it. My mother told me my father died in a car accident, she whispered. Dominic shook his head, grief flickering across his features. She lied to protect you. She lied because she had to. Emily stared at him, trembling. You're saying... I'm saying... Dominic said, voice breaking for the first time, that you are my daughter. The room spun. Emily gripped the edge of the desk to stay upright. My father is dead now, Dominic continued. But my enemies aren't. If they find out who you are, they will use you against me. That is something I will not allow. Before she could protest, before she could even breathe, he nodded to one of his men waiting outside the door. Bring Sarah Carter here immediately. Tell her it's about Emily. Emily's head snapped up. No, you can't just... I must, he said. It's no longer just your life at risk. It's hers too. Minutes felt like hours before the door opened again. Emily held her breath as her mother stepped into the study, pale and trembling. The moment Sarah saw Dominic, her knees nearly buckled. But the moment she saw Emily really saw her standing beside him, she broke. Emily, oh God? The emotion in her mother's voice shattered whatever defenses Emily had left. She rushed into Sarah's arms, tears burning at the corners of her eyes. For a moment, nothing else existed. No crime imperis. No secrets. No danger. Just a mother clinging to her daughter, as though she might disappear. But when Sarah finally pulled back and looked at Dominic, fear and history swirled in her expression. 20 years of running. 20 years of hiding. 20 years of lies. And now, none of it could be undone. Emily stood between them, her heart pounding, realizing life as she knew it had just ended. No matter what came next, there was no going back. That night, in the mansion of the city's most feared man, a broken family stood reunited, terrified, uncertain, but tied together by a truth that could no longer be buried. The air inside Dominic Varela's mansion felt heavier the next morning, as if the walls themselves understood the storm, gathering around the reunited family. Emily barely slept. Neither did her mother. Neither. she suspected. Did Dominic? Too many years of secrets had finally collided. And now all three of them had to face the consequences. Sarah Carter sat on the edge of the couch in Dominic's study, fingers twisting nervously in her lap. She looked exhausted, older somehow. Not in age, but in the weight of truths she'd carried alone. Dominic watched her from across the room, silent, but with a tension simmering beneath the surface. Emily finally broke the stillness. "Mum, you have to tell me everything now." Sarah closed her eyes, inhaling shakily. "You deserve the truth. You always did." Her gaze drifted to Dominic, before returning to her daughter. "When I found out I was pregnant with you, Dominic and I were planning to leave the city. We thought we could run from all of this. Start fresh." Her voice cracked, and Emily moved closer, taking her hand. "But his father found out," Sarah continued. "He was a cruel man. Emily. Cruel in ways you cannot imagine. He showed me what happened to women who betrayed the Varela bloodline. What happened to their children. What he'd do to you if I stayed." She swallowed hard. "He told me to disappear. To tell Dominic I lost the baby. To protect you from him. Protect you from this world." Dominic's jaw tightened. "Sarah. I would have protected. You couldn't protect yourself back then," she said gently, but firmly. "You were still under his control. I did what I had to do." Emily felt a rush of conflicting emotions: anger, sorrow, confusion, an ache for the years lost. She squeezed her mother's trembling hand before standing to face both of them. "So all this time, you've been hiding from a man who was already dead?" Sarah's eyes filled with regret. "I didn't know when he died. And even then, Dominic's enemies didn't die with him. I chose the world that kept you safest." A sharp knock interrupted them. Rena Vega, Dominic's security chief, entered with her usual crisp efficiency. But her eyes were alert, sharper than usual. Something was wrong. "Sir," she announced. "We have a situation." Dominic straightened. "Go on." "We've picked up surveillance around Miss Carter's apartment. Marco De Luca's men." Emily felt a chill crawl up her spine. The rival crime boss Dominic had mentioned only briefly now suddenly felt real. Too real. Brenna continued. "He's extended surveillance to her college campus. 2 of her professors were approached yesterday, and her friend group is being monitored." Sarah gasped softly. Emily's jaw tightened. "My friends, they don't know anything." "That doesn't matter," Dominic said. "De Luca is probing for leverage. He knows every person in your orbit is a potential pressure point. And he knows who she is," Rena added. "Or he will within days." Sarah stood abruptly. "This is exactly why I left. Emily is not part of this world. She doesn't belong here." "Dominic." Her voice trembled, but her fury was unmistakable. Dominic met her gaze evenly. "She is part of it now. De Luca made sure of that the moment he started watching her. That's because you exposed her." Sarah cried. "You brought her here. You put her in danger." "I didn't expose her," Dominic replied, voice steady but strained. "The moment she recognized that tattoo, it exposed itself. Secrets don't stay buried forever." "Sarah." Emily was done being talked about, like she wasn't in the room. "Stop." Her voice, strong and sudden, cut through the tension. Both parents fell silent, surprised by the force behind it. "I'm not a child," she said. "You're both talking like this is something happening to me. But it's happening to all of us. And I'm not going to let myself be hidden away or protected like some fragile thing." Dominic frowned. "Emily, no," she insisted. "I'm done living my life without answers, without identity, without knowing who I am or where I came from." Sarah reached for her. Voice soft. Sweetheart. We only want to keep you safe. And I appreciate that, Emily said, gently moving her hand away. But hiding hasn't kept me safe. It's only kept me ignorant. Rena exchanged a glance with Dominic, one that acknowledged a truth none of them wanted to accept. Emily looked between her parents, a steadiness settling into her that hadn't been there before. If DeLuca wants leverage, if he wants a weakness to exploit, then let's give him the opposite. Dominic slowly raised an eyebrow. Explain. Emily inhaled deeply. We stop letting him control the narrative. We stop giving him secrets to uncover. Instead, we tell the world exactly who I am. Sarah stared at her, horrified. Emily. No. Absolutely not. But Dominic didn't dismiss the idea. In fact, something in his expression shifted fear, mixed with reluctant admiration. Emily continued. If I become a public figure, your daughter, your heir, then he can't use me as a hidden weakness. I'll be protected by visibility, by status, by legitimacy. Rena nodded slowly. It's risky, but strategically sound. Public figures are harder to target. Too much attention. Too much scrutiny. And the Varela name carries its own weight. Dominic added. Even our enemies follow certain rules. Sarah shook her head. Tears forming. You're talking about putting her in front of every shark in this city. Mom, Emily said softly. I'd rather face sharks than stay prey. No one spoke for a long moment. Finally, Dominic exhaled. If we do this, we do it perfectly. Your identity must be airtight. Your background unquestionable. Your presence undeniable. Rena stepped forward. We'll need records. School transcripts. Travel history. Press releases. And a narrative. Dominic added. One that explains why you've never been seen before. Emily nodded. Something believable. Dominic tapped a thoughtful rhythm on the desk. A private Swiss academy. They're known for discretion. You attended from age 12 through graduation. Humanitarian work abroad. Rena suggested. Partnership with the Varela Foundation. Emily smiled faintly. That covers the compassion part. Sarah looked at her daughter, with a mix of pride and heartbreak. I'll help with that. If she's going to be a Varela, she's also going to be a Carter. Both sides. Dominic softened. Just slightly. Then we do this together. And so the preparation began. What should have taken years unfolded over days. Dominic's digital forensics team fabricated an entire polished history, complete with photos, documents, and connections to prestigious schools. Emily's new identity painted her as well-traveled, well-educated, and deeply involved in philanthropic causes, a daughter groomed for leadership, a force to be reckoned with. Avarelaer. Meanwhile, Sarah worked with the foundation teams, shaping Emily's humanitarian profile. She insisted on authenticity, real causes, real programs, real compassion. I won't let her become just a symbol, she said. She's going to make a difference. Dominic agreed without hesitation. Then let her legacy begin now. But beneath all the careful planning, danger still pulsed around them. DeLuca's surveillance intensified. Dominic's security network watched his men inch closer. It was only a matter of time before the rival crime lord made a move. Which was why Dominic prepared his own. On the night of Emily's grand debut, she stood in her suite wearing a gown that shimmered like moonlight. Sarah adjusted the straps while Dominic waited at the doorway. Unusually solemn. Emily caught the flicker of silver in his hand. A small flash drive. What's that, she asked. Insurance. Dominic said quietly. 20 years of DeLuca's operations. Every dirty deal. Everybody he buried. Every crime he's ever hidden. Emily stared at him. You've been collecting evidence on him since long before you were born. Dominic answered. I never intended to use it, unless I had something worth protecting. The meaning behind the words struck Emily deeply. Tonight, he said, slipping the flash drive into his jacket. If De Luca moves against us, I will end him. Sarah stiffened. Dominic. No more running. He said. Not for any of us. Emily took a slow breath. Steadying herself. Dominic offered his arm. Shall we? And as they walked toward the ballroom, she heard the murmur of the crowd waiting power brokers. Politicians. Criminal families. Philanthropists all gathered to witness the birth of the Varela heir. And among them, entering with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, was Marco De Luca, a man arriving with the confidence of someone who believed the night belonged to him. He had no idea it didn't. The grand ballroom of the Varela estate shimmered like a universe of gold and crystal. Chandeliers glittered overhead, casting light onto the elite of the city politicians, industrial tycoons, foreign dignitaries, and the quiet but unmistakable presence of the criminal underworld. Everyone had gathered for one reason: Dominic Varela's mysterious announcement. For years, he had ruled the city from the shadows. Tonight, he stepped into the light with something no one expected. Someone. Emily stood at the top of the sweeping staircase, her hands steady at her sides, even though her heart thundered like a storm inside her chest. Dominic stood on her right, composed and powerful. Sarah stood on her left, radiant and anxious, holding herself with the protective grace only a mother could embody. The room erupted into whispers the moment guests realized who Emily stood beside. And when Dominic raised a hand for silence, the room obeyed instantly. Ladies and gentlemen, his voice carried effortlessly across the ballroom. Thank you for joining us tonight. I have brought you here to witness the most important moment of my life. He glanced at Emily, and something soft flickered behind the steel of his expression. My daughter, he said. Emily Varela. The murmur that rolled across the room felt like a wave. Cameras flacht. Shock registered on faces that rarely betrayed emotion. Rivals stiffened. Allies exchanged curious glances. Everyone understood the significance. The Varela Empire had an heir. Emily stepped forward, taking a slow breath as the crowd waited for her to speak. Thank you, she began, her voice calm but warm. I've spent many years away from the life you all know, learning, growing, and discovering who I want to be. Her eyes swept the room, settling on no one and everyone at once. Today, I'm honored to join the Varela Foundation, an organization that will push for real change, real compassion, and a new legacy for our family. A legacy built not on fear, but on purpose. A ripple of approval moved through the crowd. Even those who feared Dominic found themselves impressed by the poise of the young woman standing before them. Emily continued. Whatever the Varela name meant before tonight, it will mean something new moving forward. I hope you'll join me in shaping that future. Applause followed, not explosive, but student, respectful, and curious. And yet, even through the clapping, Emily felt it. A presence, a gaze, a cold, deliberate stare. Marco De Luca. He stood near the center of the ballroom, surrounded by men who pretended to be guests, but were unmistakably his guards. His lips curved into a polite smile, but his eyes were sharp with calculation. When the applause died down, he made his move. He approached Emily with the air of a man approaching prey that doesn't yet know she's been cornered. His suit was impeccable, his cologne expensive, but his intentions radiated menace. Ems. Varela, he murmured, taking her hand as though greeting an old friend. You made quite an entrance tonight. Emily withdrew her hand calmly. Thank you for attending. His smile widened, but his voice dropped to a whisper. Only she could hear. Your speech was lovely. Idealistic. Naive. Sarah appeared at Emily's side. In an instant. Her presence. A silent warning. But DeLuca didn't acknowledge her. His gaze stayed fixed on Emily, like a snake, studying a bird. Tell me, dear. He continued softly. Did your father tell you what happens to families who try to evolve? Emily didn't flinch. He told me enough. Not enough. DeLuca whispered. Leaning closer, ask him about the Rodriguez family. Ask him how long their new legacy lasted. Before Emily could respond, Dominic arrived. Calm. Controlled. Smiling in a way that did nothing to hide the danger in his eyes. Marco. Dominic greeted him lightly. I see you've met my daughter. DeLuca straightened. Mask immediately shifting from predator to politician. A lovely young woman. Truly. Careful. Dominic replied smoothly. Or people might think you're trying to intimidate her at her own debut. DeLuca laughed. A humorless sound. I wouldn't dream of it. No. Dominic said. But dreams rarely matter. In our world. With that, he lifted a glass from a passing tray. Offering it to DeLuca. Another to Emily. Another for himself. To new beginnings. Dominic said. DeLuca raised his glass. And to old endings. Their gazes locked. The world held its breath. Then came the faintest vibration. A subtle buzz against Dominic's wrist. Hidden beneath his cuff. Emily almost missed it. But Dominic noticed. And so did the federal agents standing outside the estate. Watching for that silent signal. Inside the ballroom. Dominic clinked his glass against DeLuca's. With a steady hand. What followed exploded into chaos. The ballroom doors slammed open, as federal agents in tactical gear flooded the room. Guests screamed. Some ducked behind tables. Others raised their hands in shock and confusion. But through the uproar, the lead agent's voice cut clean through the noise. Marco DeLuca, you are under arrest for racketeering, human trafficking, weapons trafficking, kidnapping, and conspiracy to commit murder. DeLuca's face drained of color. What is the meaning of this? He demanded. Turning sharply toward Dominic. You set me up. Dominic remained perfectly calm. Even as agents moved in, I didn't set you up. Marco, he said quietly. You built your empire on bodies and blood. You left evidence everywhere. Someone merely had to collect it. The flash drive. The 20 years of files Dominic had been keeping. The anonymous leak to the federal task force. DeLuca lunged. But agents pinned him instantly. Forcing his hands behind his back. You'll pay for this, he roared. Your daughter will pay no. Dominic interrupted. Stepping forward with such cold authority, the entire room fell silent. My daughter will live her life free of men like you. DeLuca was dragged away. Raging and powerless for the first time in decades. And with that, the DeLuca empire began to crumble. The following morning, the world woke to headlines, announcing the fall of one of the most violent criminal organizations in the country. News vans swarmed City Hall. Reporters speculated about shifting power, shifting alliances, shifting futures. But Dominic, Emily, and Sarah were nowhere near the chaos. They were miles away at a quiet lakeside safe house, a cabin surrounded by tall pine trees, and still water that shimmered under a rising sun. The three of them sat around a wooden table, as breakfast cooked on the stove. The peacefulness felt surreal after the night they had survived. Dominic had spent the early hours making calls, closing accounts, dissolving old networks, redirecting assets. He had already begun dismantling every criminal arm of his empire. The Varela dynasty would exist, but in a new form. A legitimate one. Are you sure about this? Sarah asked. Watching him over her coffee mug, Dominic looked exhausted, but lighter than she'd ever seen him. It's time, he said. Emily deserves a world where her last name opens doors instead of graves. Sarah's eyes softened. She nodded. And I want you to help lead the foundation. Dominic added. You have a better heart than I ever did. Sarah froze. You want me involved? I need you involved. He corrected gently. Our family's future needs compassion, as much as it needs strategy. Emily watched them with quiet amazement. A warmth settling into her chest. For the first time, she saw what her family could be: imperfect, broken, complicated, but real. They ate breakfast together like they'd done it for years, instead of hours. Peace settled over the cabin. Hope settled with it. Then Emily set down her fork, a teasing spark in her eyes. So, she began casually. I've been thinking, maybe I should get a tattoo. You know, something symbolic. A new version of the serpent. Our version. She barely got the sentence out before both Dominic and Sarah, without hesitation, without even a glance at each other, answered in perfect unison. Absolutely not. Emily blinked, then burst into laughter. Real laughter. The kind that rose from relief and love and a sense of belonging she'd never known until now. Her parents exchanged a look, equal parts exasperation and affection, and for the first time in 20 years, the three of them laughed together like a true family. Outside, the lake rippled gently. The sun climbed higher, and within those walls, a dynasty reborn began writing the first chapter of a new legacy. One forged not by fear, but by choice. A future none of them had ever imagined, but one they would build together. If you enjoyed this story of family, redemption, danger, and transformation, don't forget to support the channel. Your engagement helps these stories reach more people and allows me to keep creating new ones every week. Please hit like if the story pulled you in. Subscribe so you never miss the next chapter. Share this video with someone who loves emotional drama and crime family twists. And tell me in the comments, which character surprised you the most, Emily, Dominic, or Sarah? Your support means everything. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.